Hey guys, Maker here. It's been a minute since I last talked about the current state of my project I've been working on for, I don't know, probably the past 6 months maybe. I don't actually know exactly how long I've been working on it, but it's been a while. And I think the last time I talked about the progress was I said that the next thing I was going to work on was the springs, like integrating the springs into the gimbal and adding the Hall sensors and the placements for those. And I've pretty much done that and a whole lot of other stuff. And I think I've gotten to a stage where I think it's just about ready to be printed and tested. Just the last few things I need to add are a hole in this wall here, in this gimbal enclosure for like a USB-C port, and inside I need to add a place where I can mount the Arduino Pro Micro, but that'll come at a later stage. And if anybody's interested, I do have a Patreon set up. It's completely free to join. I basically just post some thoughts and my progress more often on here, so you can see where I'm at in the design. And that's just Maker on Patreon. Anyway, let's go through some of the things that I have changed the most. Let's go through some of the most significant changes, I'd say, is the springs. We'll start with the springs. If I take the shell off, you can see that I've added mounting points for each of the axes and for springs to attach. So just for the twist axis, I put one spring. I'm thinking that it should be fine as long as the springs are like sort of high tension, or like not extremely, but just enough to stop it from being a little too loose. And down here for the roll, I put two side by side. Just makes it easier to so it all fits nicely inside of the enclosure. And for the pitch, there's one on each side. And I'm hoping that everything will print nicely. The strength shouldn't be too much affected. I am planning on printing the cams in like at least 100% in PETG, or if I can, I'd like to get them printed in nylon, maybe by SLS, which will give them a lot more strength, be a lot more durable, because some of these sections here might give out if it's not strong enough. So that's pretty much the springs sorted. 2 for the main pitch and roll, and just 1 for the twist action. Now for the Hall sensors, things got a little more tricky, but I think I've gotten it to a stage where I'm pretty happy with it. So this is for the pitch axis. I got the Hall sensor mounted on the actual the center core bit, which does the moving, the back and forth moving, and that sensor is in between this mount, which has 2 sets of magnets. They're 5mm by 5mm diameter magnets, and they're like I think my magnets are 1.5 millimeters thick, but I just have 2 stacked up on each side. So then hopefully that should give enough to get a clear reading for the hole sensor. And that's the pitch side sorted, and I'm pretty happy with that. This one was slightly trickier to figure out, but I'm integrating the magnet mount inside of this roll block here, and that should just be easy to plug a couple of magnets on either side. And same again for this one. It's 2 1.5 millimeter thick 5 millimeter diameter magnets. I can like super glue inside. Same hole sensor mount, and it is keyed, this mount. If I can go and find where this is at, I can, where is it? In bodies, here, and I can isolate that, and it is keyed, so we'll just be able to glue this into the part where it needs to connect to and super glue it in, and that should be just fine. Just to make sure that the hole sensor is like perfectly aligned, straight up and down, so it matches up with these magnets nicely. So let's just go isolate that. And for the twist magnet placement, I had to get a little bit creative with this one because I tried to integrate it into this top section here and have like a sensor that hung over with 2 magnets on each side, and as you would twist it, it would get closer and further away from each magnet. But trying to get that all into this handle, into this grip here, was a little bit tricky. There's not a whole lot of room down in that bottom section for a hole sensor to go, especially with this bolt right down the middle for the strength. So instead I got a little bit creative here. There's this twist mount here, which basically, let me just get this all set up. Twist axis, grip mount, and in here, this is where I've put the sensor. So the sensor for the twist is actually stationary. It's integrated. It's hiding inside of the center core here. And this part, the sensor is stationary, but the magnets, since these are attached to this part, the grip mount, which actually does the turning, the magnets will be the ones that are moving closer and further away from the sensor, and that should be enough to get a good reading. And there's only one 1.5 millimeter thick magnet, because these are fairly close compared to the pitch and roll, and that should be just fine. So that is probably more of the serious updates I've done. I've gotten rid of some like sections for like adding nuts for the screws, because it's just sitting there. There's not really going to be much that's going to try and push it out, so it just screws right into the plastic, and that should be okay. I have also, I changed these bolts for the cams because the guy that designed this last had Robinson head bolts, I think they're called, but it was kind of hard to find a good source to get those, so I've just opted for these button head like bolts that will just thread straight through. Should make things a little easier. And I think that is pretty much all for the gimbal assembly, and that should be just fine, I'm hoping. Fingers crossed. But I think that's pretty much all ready to be printed and tested out. Again, cams printed in either like 100% PETG to give it as much strength as you can possibly give it, or getting like PCB to print SLS nylon, which would be I think preferred for me, so I might try to get that happening. Now moving on to the grip, things that I have worked on is the spring placement and what kind of spring I'm using. I'm just using like a simple, I think it's like a 20mm diameter, oh no, not 20mm, 20mm long spring. Can't quite remember the diameter, but it's just a simple compression spring. Sorry, it's getting quite a bit rainy and loud outside. Sorry about that. Just close my window. Anyway, it's just a simple compression spring. Should be enough. There's nothing really fancy going on with the trigger setup. I'm just gonna, for the pivot here, I'm just gonna get like a 3mm diameter rod, and I'll cut it down to size to fit through each side of the grip and through the trigger. I have updated one, or technically they're the same, hat switch assembly to, because I printed a prototype of the old version. Let me get these up real quick. So I printed a couple of prototypes of this version, which just about like almost works, but the problem is this the cap would twist around inside of the housing, inside of the shell, and like it doesn't really quite click the buttons properly. So I've made it shorter so this screw threads more into the actual cap, like hat bit. If I can get this. So yeah, it threads way further into that, and hopefully it should. And I've also put the buttons a little bit closer to the actual shaft bit, so hopefully it doesn't wobble around as much. And that's pretty much it. Stop it from wiggling around. I've added these little like walls on either side of the button, which should hopefully stop it from twisting around as much, but we'll see how well that will print. And these are pretty easy to prototype, so I'll do that eventually. And I think that's just about everything new. Again, like I said, I gotta finish the USB-C port inside at the front of this enclosure, and adding like a place to mount the Arduino Pro Micro. So that's it. Thank you guys for tuning in, watching, following up with the current stage of this project. Again, if you want to follow the updates more often, I do have my Patreon, patreon.com/MikaMaker. It's completely free, and I just write a little paragraph talking about what I've done in the design, what I've changed, and what I'm going to do in the future. But since this is pretty much the end of the design stage, I'd say, I think future updates are probably going to be more to do with prototyping. So if you're interested, please check that out. It'd be good to know that people are interested in following along. If you have any advice for me, I'd like to hear that as well in the comments. And yeah, thank you again. Bye bye.